Like there's a couple on this list that people will be like, wait, but that's not as good at that. Well, it might be as good of it
Yeah.
when we talk about the price, especially if you do maybe overbuy early or run into some eco problems against a team that's kind of dominating that part of the game.
Oh no, there's another squad attacking.
Now, a little bit of a recap on what we think the meta weapons are round 3 onwards. And this is kind of up to you in terms of optic and where you're spending your materials. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we say invest in one weapon. Don't try to go 2 ways to try to get an SMG and an AR and upgrade them both. Not really doable until like a round 9 sudden death situation. So, and this is kind of based off of our experience in arenas, what we've talked about before on the show, and what we've done in our weapon breakdowns, as well as the cost of these weapons in arenas.
And that's the important part as well, the cost. Because I do think, make sure, like there's a couple on this list that people will be like, wait, but that's not as good at that. Well, it might be as good of it when we talk about the price, especially if you do maybe overbuy early or run into some eco problems against a team that's kind of dominating that part of the game.
Yeah, and this list is a lot of different classes of weapons, a lot of different types, but it's in an order that I think is really good. So this is kind of in descending order in terms of power and maybe preference. Rampage, R301, Flatline, Volt, Car, EVA 8, Triple Take, RD45, Hemlock, Wingman, and then the L-Star is still in there.
Just barely squeaked in there for the rankings today.
It defined arenas for the longest time. It's definitely still decent, but I think I'm glad that it's not completely dominating the game mode. It's in a really good spot in terms of its price and its power. I'm feeling good about it.
And something I like to always mention when we talk about guns, and I'll reiterate here, because it's even more important than arenas than BR, is like, this is our preference. This is our order of how we have things. But if you look at this list or hear the list, because we're a podcast, geez, and you say, oh, Flatline, I can't really shoot straight with that. I can't hit my shots. It's not going to be as good for you. Like, that's the most important thing in this game, is making sure you're using the guns that you are most confident with and you can succeed with. So yeah, if you are like, oh man, I absolutely do love playing with the Car, like that's like one of my favorite guns, yeah, that can climb the list for you, because that's the most important thing in arenas for the most part, is can you hit your shots? It's the most important thing in Apex in general, but it's just amplified in arenas.
Totally. Now, last bit of kind of overall tips before we go into a per map breakdown. I want to talk about the most relevant legends and the least relevant legends. But before we do so, Shay was talking about how one of his favorite buys is in round 1, getting the purple P2020 and then going grenades. That is a really good strategy. And the reason being, arenas is not an abilities focused mode. It really isn't. And that is a shock to us, just because this is Apex Legends. It's kind of all about the legends. But arenas is way predicated on the weapons and throwables. So the legend choice isn't the end all be all. But as we've talked about in our previous episode about arenas, look at those passive abilities, look at those tactical abilities, because in that order, they're going to make an impact on the gun play of arenas.
Well said. Well said.
Now, the most relevant legends, we have Bloodhound, Valkyrie, Lifeline, Bangalore, Horizon, Loba, Fuse, Gibraltar, Seer, and Rampart.
Great legends.
Couple of spicy takes, but really good legends that honestly are geared to perform well in arenas.
Yeah. And like you kind of mentioned, look at the passives first. If you're unsure on who to pick, like if you are confused on who to pick, then you don't have to worry about it if you go passive. Like I love Valk, Lifeline, and Bangalore. Those are my 3 most played arenas legends, because I get to go into the game without really a concern for how I'm going to think about using the abilities. I just get to focus on shooting people straight. And that's the most important thing for me. But I do think like the rest of this list are all great options, and we start to look at tacticals as potentially the reason for choosing people like Fuse or like Seer potentially, and that's really important.
Yeah. Now, the least relevant legends, we have Wraith, Pathfinder, Octane, Ash, Caustic, Mirage, Watson, Revenant, and Crypto.
And Mirage.
Maybe,
Man.
you feel this is kind of a harsh list, but like Shay said, we're really looking at passive abilities. And when we think about the idea of winning a one situation or having a priority of sticking with your team in arenas, doesn't really matter a legend if you are in a situation where you're in a 1v2, 1v3, or you're leaving your teammates in a situation where they're down a teammate.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, a legend like Wraith, maybe Pathfinder, Octane, even Ash with the ultimate, kind of encourage that kind of situation. And that playstyle loses rounds and loses games. So
Well, you need to, if you're mobile and in arenas, one thing we like is making sure you can go both directions. Loba, kind of the exception because we do truly like her ult a lot in arenas. But like with Valk, you can go up and come down. You can go forward, come back in the jetpack most of the time. With Path, with Wraith, with my gosh, Ash, you're one way in, and that's it. There's no retreat, essentially. I mean, we don't really count the Wraith portal. We don't use that a ton in arenas personally, but maybe there's a couple folks out there.
it's hard. It's hard to use.
Mhm.
And I think that kind of comes down to it too. When abilities aren't really the focus of arenas and shouldn't be where you're putting all your effort into, you want to focus on gun skill. So don't choose a legend that's really hard technically. And you have to think about it and focus on, your bumpers and not your triggers.
Boom! Whole squad down.
Hey, brother, not today. Maybe tomorrow.